Before we get to the game this past Sunday, good news or news today about Dave Montgomery. Dan Campbell said maybe getting a third opinion on David Montgomery, so might not be placed on IR, and there may be some hope. Give our fans some hope, Dan. What's going on with this situation as of right now?
Yeah, I mean, Braylon, you know all the ACL, MCL, PCL, all that stuff, and the MCL is one that can be a little bit funny, and it's one that I think it's a pain tolerance thing sometimes if they find out that you can't do any more damage to it. So that's probably about as far as I'd go on my understanding of an MCL, but it doesn't appear that it's done yet. I don't know if that means it's still going to be several weeks or a month before he could possibly come back or somewhere in the playoffs or anything like that. I guess just what you take it as good news is that they're being careful with it. They're trying to make sure they do the right thing with it. They're not going to do anything that's going to endanger David. And if he can come back, that would be fantastic because obviously, you know, as that defense gets hit, they need that offense to carry more of the load, and he's a guy that can do that. So we'll see what happens. And bottom line is, and I know this is the way they're looking at it, whatever happens, they're going to make sure that he's taken care of because they don't want anything short-term to impact something long-term.
No, not especially after you signed him to a long term. You know, Dave Montgomery is a part of the makeup here. He's a part of the identity, the Detroit Lions. So I definitely see that. Aiden Hutchinson, he announced that he says that he hopes to play on Super Bowl, or he promises that to play Super Bowl. Now, this is something that's great for the fan base. But how serious would you even take Aiden's comments?
Look, I know if there is anybody that will get back as fast as they possibly can, it's Aiden Hutchinson because he's got that Amon-Ra gene. He's just relentless to be the best he can be, and he wants to get back out there with his teammates. And I love the fact that he's being optimistic. But again, I go back to what I said about Demo. They're not going to do anything that will impact Aiden long term. And if he's going to be out there for a snap in a Super Bowl or an NFC Championship game or something like that, they're going to want to feel absolutely certain that he can put as much pressure on that leg as possible and, you know, get in there and mix it up with a 330-pound offensive tackle and not have any concerns that there's something pre-existing there that's going to be a problem. So how serious do you take it? I'll believe it when I see it, and that's nothing to do with Aiden. It's a really serious injury that he had, and I know he'll be back when he's ready to be back, and when the doctors say he's ready to be back, and when the organization says he's ready to be back. And if that was because they advanced to a Super Bowl or an NFC Championship game, that would be obviously fantastic because when he went down, he lost one of the top defensive players in football. But again, man, that's a big one to come back from that quickly, and we'll just see what happens. But I know it is as fast as he can do it, that's how fast it would happen.
Dan, all these other injuries, and I don't have to go through them all, but Aleem McNeil right in the middle there, Carlton Davis in the backfield, Khalil Dorsey goes down, Carlton Davis's replacement, and Dan Campbell refuses to ever even bring up an injury when he's doing his post-game press conference. This week he kind of brought it up and said, it's fuel for us. We're going to go out and win for these guys. How can a team even think about losing when you're led by men like this?
Well, it's funny because so many coaches over the years have told me when they're at a podium talking to us, they're talking to their players. Yep. They're setting the tone for their organization. Now, he'll say these things to them in a meeting or something like that, but believe me, when Dan Campbell goes out there and says those things and sets the mood for his team and sets the mood for going forward, he's talking to fans. He's talking to media, he's talking to players, he's talking to coaches, he's talking to the sales department over there at Ford Field, he's talking to everybody in the organization. That's how he wants everybody to view this. Look, they may be up against it here, and I don't know if they have enough left to finish this thing, but I do know this, Dan Campbell's not going to take what it says on paper and apply that to the future of this team. He's going to trot 11 guys out there on Sunday against Chicago, and the following week against San Francisco, and the following week against Minnesota, and the following week if they have a playoff game against somebody, and we know they'll have a playoff game in the second week. So, look, I just think we know his makeup. He's not going to give into this thing. He's not going to use it as an excuse. It doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of reality here possibly that, man, you've endured so many injuries that your defense is up against it right now. But you can't go up there in front of the media and say that and have your players think that they have an out that, hey, we don't have enough guns left in this thing. We're going to just kind of, go out there, do what we can, but it'll be all right. The tone he has set for every injury that has happened since the beginning of the year is the next guy that has gone in is expected to play just as well as the guy that he's replacing. Now, is that realistic? No, but it is the tone that you'd want to set so that there is no let up and there is no lowering of the bar for anybody that goes out there. And that's what a head coach should do.
Every Wednesday, we are blessed to have the voice of the Lions here, Dan Miller's Weekly Drive presented by Les Stanford. We've been talking about who is going to supplement the run game next to Jahmyr Gibbs. Got a lot of different things going on, talking about maybe, Saint and J-Mo getting some more sweeps, maybe even seeing Laporta on some goal line, maybe even seeing some offensive linemen. One guy we do know is Netflix. Another guy that we don't know is somebody that I was on before the draft, Sione Vaki. This guy was actually the number 1 receiving back with 10 or more receptions last year in college, and the number 4 running back, PFF rated, with 40 or more carries. I didn't think we were drafting him to be a running back, and in fact, we haven't used him defensively at all. I've always kind of thought that this is the direct replacement to Jahmyr Gibbs. Do you think we don't see much of him because of that? Because we need a power back, somebody like Netflix? Or do you think we finally get a taste of a guy in Sione Vaki that was a relatively unknown draft pick for the Lions this April?
Yeah, the short answer is I'm not sure how they're going to do that. The long answer would be I think we do see him at times. I think you'll see Reynolds. And I think you'll see Vaki. I mean, I think Gibbs is obviously going to get the bulk of the work here. And he's a gifted back. He easily could be one of the best single backs in this league with his skill set. But I think if they've shown anything, they want to spot these guys. They want to make sure that they're not – I don't think he's cut out to have 35 touches a game over the final 3 games of the regular season and roll into the playoffs. So I do think you're going to need some other guys to help lift the load. This coaching staff really trusts Greg Reynolds. They really believe in him when he goes out there. They believe in him in pass protection. They believe in him when he's got the football in his hands. They believe he can do the job. But I do think Vaki gives you a little bit of that elusiveness that you'd like to have. We saw some of it in the preseason. And I'd be surprised if he didn't get at least a little shake out there and an ability to take some snaps and see what he can do. I just think when you get to this point, if in fact they don't have Montgomery, I do think you probably look to see, okay, what can these other 2 guys give us? And they do have kind of a diverse skill set there where Reynolds is more of a power guy and Vaki is a guy that can give you, as you attributed to him there, an ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and also an ability to make some guys miss. So I'm kind of interested to see how they handle it. My guess is, again, that obviously Gibbs gets the bulk of it, but that we see both of those guys in some of the other situations.
Dan, one thing about our network is we're going to tell you when we got to take right, because I know I do it all the time, and Anson definitely was right about Sione Vaki. He called that back in January, so shout out to Anson on that one. We got to talk about Sunday. Obviously, it is a loss. 11 in a row, they're going for 12. They lose to the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen put on another good performance. As a team, they just look really good, and the Lions offense did well. I don't want to ask about the injuries in the game, more so overall view. What did you see in the loss to the Buffalo Bills this past Sunday?
I think, number one, in a game like that ends up being a shootout, you can look back and say, when you have 2 empty possessions to start the game and 2 empty possessions to start the second half, that really puts you behind the 8 ball in terms of momentum, in particular when you're having trouble stopping them. You know, we talk about it in the broadcast. If it's a shootout, bring your guns, and you've got to be ready to go. And they weren't right off the top. Now, obviously, they picked it up. They scored 42 points. They had over 500 yards. But when you're down 14-0 and you're trying to come from behind, your defense is having a tough time getting stops. You got a quarterback playing at an MVP level out there. All credit to Josh Allen, who was terrific in this game. You look to your offense to have a little bit more. And, I apologize if a team scoring 42 points and asking for an offense more seems odd. But I felt like the tone for that game was set when the offense wasn't able to score early, and it gave Buffalo, that ability to just feel good about themselves, puff out their chest, and play with a little less pressure on them because they had the edge on the scoreboard. And you don't want to give a team like that ability. So if anything you learn from that, I think is, look, we know this defense is going to be a little bit shorthanded going forward. The offense has to try to avoid those lulls, start games fast, put the other team back on their heels. When we've seen them do that against Seattle, against Dallas, against some of these other teams, it's been tough for the other teams to keep up with the volume that this offense can throw at them. But in this game, it took them a little while to get going. And I think in both halves, that hurt them. And in the second half, you come out at halftime, you're ready to roll. You're thinking we're going to get back in this thing. And boom, James Cook goes 41 yards for a touchdown. And all of a sudden, you're further behind. So I think that, look, the defense had a lot of problems in that game. They got to figure some of those out. Those backs were getting to the second level before they were being touched. You got to figure that out and find some way to box in the quarterbacks. But, look, he's having a special season. He was just red hot in that game. Give credit to Buffalo. But you do have to figure out some way to shore up that defense a little bit. Not the same challenge this week against Caleb Williams, but don't give him any reason to feel confident in this game. Find a way to get some stops early.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's kind of like the Green Bay Lions game. Obviously, Green Bay, they got behind the Lions early, and though they heated up late, Lions are already here and playing a little bit better, so I definitely love that. Got to ask the one question. I know Maz is going here next, so I apologize, man. Got to talk about the call. You know it's on the board. Where are you with the call? I've heard a lot of people say they don't have a problem with the call, and I heard a lot of people say if it would have been on the next possession after you stop and score, they don't have a problem. Where are you? 12 minutes, Dan Campbell, he makes that call.
I love it. I said it during the broadcast. I think the odds of you getting it in this NFL with the rules that they have in place now are just so overwhelmingly against you that I didn't like it there. Now, I understand his thinking. Their defense wasn't stopping them, and he thought at worst they're going to get the ball 45-yard line or something like that. But I guess I'd say even at the 45-yard line, if you're giving it to a hot quarterback, that's a problem. But, I just, again, didn't love it, said it at the time. Certainly didn't anticipate a return like that. That was just crazy. But I know where he was coming from. But it's not the way I would have gone. I would have seen if there was some way that I could get a stop from my defense and try to keep some momentum because you had just scored. You were getting back in it. I think you were 10 down at that point. And that just, allowed them to go down there and get a 3-score lead again. But man, it's just so hard in this league now because you can't overload the one side. You got to have 5 and 5. And the numbers just don't add up to onside kicks. And more than anything else, that would probably be the reason. If we had the old rules and you had a chance to go out there and really get it, because it was a good kick, and they got a bounce off of Holland's hands, he made a great play to haul it back in. So maybe if you have 6 guys over there or something like that, you got a chance to jar that thing loose or get there before he does. But it's just they've made it so difficult now with these new kickoff rules.
Dan, they got to change this rule. I mean, it's a terrible rule. It's a bad kickoff. Listen, here's what you do. Regular kickoffs, go back to the old way. If you kick it in the end zone, and the other team can't run it out, that team gets it on the 40-yard line or 35-yard line.
I think 35. I wouldn't be surprised, Maz, if they did the 35.
There you go.
Just to make it a little more of a penalty to not have a return.
Yep.
Look, this is clearly
it's not working.
Brought the result that they're looking for.
It's not.
Because teams have just, look, even when teams return it, they rarely get it past the 30. Your first physical contact, if you watch these things, seems to be around the 23, 24-yard line. And they're not getting it to the 30. So you're fighting like heck just to get to the 30 on a return. It's not worth it.
No.
And if you're kicking it off, are you fighting to stop them at the 26 if you land it at the 1 and make them return it? Mm-hmm. So they tried. It didn't get the desired result. I think they'll take a look at it in the offseason. I think it'll be either tossed or tweaked. But certainly this isn't an answer that they were looking for.
It's got to go. It's an embarrassment, especially the onside kick rule. That's an embarrassment. You can only do it in the fourth quarter.
Well, we had the onside kick rule that had changed in terms of how many guys you can put on each side.
Yes.
We had that, but before you didn't have to declare.
Correct.
And before you didn't have to just do it in the fourth quarter, and that's the other thing is.
And behind.
There's no surprise anymore.
No, that's a bad thing. That's got to go. I wanted to ask you about the O-line. I know, let's face it, these guys are beaten. They're beaten up. Do you still think they're the top line in the league, or are they wearing down?
I think everybody's beaten up at this point, but look, I'm in the booth with 2 offensive linemen every week, and they have certainly pointed out over the last 2 weeks that we are not getting the normal push that we have gotten with this offensive line. So the answer to your question is let's find out.
Yeah.
Because these guys, when we've seen them have an off game, they've bounced back. Now we've seen them kind of have 2 off games. Now look, scoreboard didn't work in their favor in this past game because the running game was kind of taken out of it. But I think they'd be the first to tell you that these aren't games that they would want to hang their hat on the last 2 weeks. They've been below 4 yards of carry in both those games. So part of this team being able to survive what they're going through right now is going to be that offensive line's got to lead. Those 5 guys have to lead the way. Those 5 guys have to help them get that running game back. And those 5 guys have to help Jared have time to stand back there and throw. This team's at their best when they're running it and they get that bang play action where Jared fakes the give and comes up firing. And it's a beautiful thing when it's working in sync. But it's tough when you're not running the ball effectively, and right now they're not. So I think it's fair to say the offensive line's had a couple of off games, and I think they'd be the first to tell you they know they got to bounce back against a pretty good Chicago defense coming up this week.
And yeah, Dan, thanks for joining us today. And I wanted to ask you about the Bears game because we all know the scare that we had on Thanksgiving, although I felt like the Lions had full control of that ball game. And personally, I think this week they're going to go in and bludgeon the Bears just based on everything that's happened. But, of course, it's a division opponent. It's not going to be easy going to Soldier Field and trying to get that dub. But can you just, elaborate on some things that the Lions can work on in order to ensure a victory in Soldier Field against the Chicago Bears?
It has never been easy to play there. That place is always difficult when you go in there, regardless of what Chicago's doing. And look, when you're talking about a team with, Swift at running back and Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and Cole Kmet, you got your hands full defensively. They're going to challenge you. And I know, Caleb Williams has been up and down, and he's looked, as Jim Schwartz used to say, suspiciously like a rookie a lot of times this year. I think still he can make some throws. And when you're a team that is up against it a little bit defensively, you're going to have to come out there and find some way to contain him because he likes to move around back there. Sometimes I think it's to his detriment, but he likes to move around back there, and you got to find some way to contain him. So this is going to be a big challenge right off the bat for this defense. I know this team's lost 8 in a row. I know they're struggling. They do have some talent on defense. I think the Lions have to get back to being, as we just talked about, being able to run it, have a balance in their attack, running the ball and being able to throw the ball. I look at this game as probably a good game to have on your schedule against a team that's lost 8 in a row, but at the same time, you will have to go in there and earn it. This isn't going to be one where you're just going to roll the football out there and win by a score of 37-17 or something like that. These guys are fighting. These guys, you got a lot of pros on the other side of that team, in particular on the defense, and some stud playmakers on offense. And this is going to be, I think, tell us a lot about where the Lions are and what the viability of this team going forward is can you handle this team on the road, outside, one of 3 outdoor games you're going to play all year, and find a way to win. We know how they can do it. It's a question of can you go out there and execute that plan.
Join us every Wednesday. Dan Miller's Weekly Drive, brought to you by Les Stanford. I got one final question for you, and it's a very important one. Favorite Christmas movie?
Christmas Vacation.
All right.
We watch it every Christmas Eve. So that's it, without a doubt.
We appreciate you, man. It's tough after a loss, but you know what's crazy? When you go 12-2, you're like, you know what? We lost one, but that's what the NFL is. Nobody's going undefeated to get to the big dance. You're going to lose some games. You got to learn from them. People forget that.
Braylon, it's crazy when you win 11 in a row and then you lose. You forget that sting and how bad it feels. And it does feel like this cloud just coming crashing down upon you. But you know what? By Tuesday or Wednesday, you figure out the next one's coming and you better get ready. And I think that's where they are right now. And I can't wait to see what happens in Chicago on Sunday.
Yeah, Dan Campbell spoke at the podium, and we got real excited about it. So I'm ready. I'm ready for Sunday. I'm ready for the Lions, man. Dan, always a pleasure. Always good to see you.
Have a good time, man.
All right, guys. Appreciate you. Thanks,
Dan.
Bless.
Always good to talk to that guy.
No
but
doubt.
You're absolutely correct. You win 11 games in a row. You feel good. You poke your chest out. You stand on the mountaintops. You beat stick, and you yell at Green Bay fans, and you're feeling yourself. And then you lose and you forget. It does hurt when you lose, but also it is one loss.
Lost to a pretty good team that's not in our league.
Last time I checked, this is a team that 2 weeks ago people were saying was better.
Yep.
Than the Kansas City
Chiefs.
Chiefs.
Conference. It's okay to lose to an AFC team. You know what? They played hard. They gave them a 14-0 lead. They gave them a 14-point lead at the beginning of the third quarter. and they still fought to the very end. And you got Jake Bates diving in for a freaking onside kick that they knew was coming, and they almost got it. The kid had it, and it got taken from him. And I believe, I think they probably could have won that damn game had they gotten the ball again. That's how confident I am in this team. But I want to ask Anson something that he hasn't been here for this question. Right now, as the defense sits, is this defense as good or is it worse than last year's defense at this point?
It's better because our secondary is deep. Losing Carlton obviously is a blow, but we didn't have a number one corner last year. It was a hodgepodge. And
you don't now.
But the big thing is, well, sure, and we're in the same situation, but you have so many other guys there that have been brought on. Amik's been really, really strong. That was such a problem for this team last year, and I think it was exacerbated by the fact that you had to have Branch close to the line. The fact that you don't have to have him and you're allowing him to free flow, I guess that's my big concern right now, is if they start playing him closer to the line, because we're hearing that if he's going to be back this week, you might have a very similar but deeper secondary last year without Hutchinson, but you get Z in there. That's a fair question. It's a really fair question, actually, Maz. The more that you do the subtraction, because there is a lot of subtraction, you lose Anzalone, you don't have Aleem, you don't have Hutch, and you can add in all of these other guys that you have. Ultimately, our Achilles heel last season was the secondary. So if the secondary can stay together and not lose any more guys, I think that this is overall a better defense. Not getting to the quarterback as much, though.
Yeah, 100%. And very interesting, Zadarius Smith didn't necessarily play as many snaps as he's usually played this past game. So we want to get to the bottom of that. Kind of still want to know what that was about. Was he a little bit banged up? Was he a little bit tired? Or was it something that Buffalo's offensive schematic scheme was doing that the Lions noticed in that? But, excuse me, talking to Dan Miller, it is one game.
Yeah.
It's one game against a damn good team. And one of the things I love that he said was we came out the block slow. Like we didn't talk about the injuries, and I didn't really want to talk about the injuries in the game. What did you see in the game? He said you got out to a slow start. You look at that Green Bay game, like Green Bay came back on the Lions towards the end. They were humping, but they were in the block. They got out the block slow. They got a bad start. That's what happened with the Lions. They got out the block slow, and you see how it affected them. The Buffalo Bills played ahead the whole game as opposed to really being in a dogfight.
The only thing that the Lions did well in that first quarter was not turn the ball over. Stick and I got into it heavy Sunday night because he says that the biggest problem with the game was the drop by Amon-Ra at the end of the second quarter. Fact is, you don't need that catch if you show up in the first quarter. Would
have been nice though.
They got smoked 14-0 in that first quarter. No momentum on the defensive side, no momentum on the offensive side. And even when we spotted other team points, we still made moves in that first quarter. I mean, there was a lot of SOL fans worried in that first quarter because they looked so lost. Now, for me,
that's how they started the Texas game.
Yeah, but not that whole first quarter.
Yeah, it was
towards
even
the end
worse
of
in
the
this game.
first quarter, towards the end of the first quarter with Minnesota, they showed they were gaining ground. They were making plays. Listen, no quit, all grit. That's what we saw out of a team that probably should have been blown out by 20-plus points on Sunday. But they lost by 6 with an opportunity to maybe have a shot with 12 seconds left. Cardiac cats. And you heard our guy Dan say it. He doesn't care if he gives up 700 yards and wins by a point. He doesn't care if they only put up 50 yards on offense and win by a point. And that's the focus of this team, is 1 week at a time, win one game at a time. And that mantra, that belief, the mojo's so strong with this team. That's why I worry about not having a Monty out there because he is a leader. Why you worry about not having Hutch and Anzalone because they're out there as leaders. But the fact is every single guy in Honolulu Blue is ready to step up like I've never seen on any other team ever. Yeah,
the Lions, all season they've been taking the ball first for the most part, scoring their first touchdown. These got to continue to do that.
There can't be any other team that's had 12-2 or even 11-3 with this many injuries. It has to be a record to be this good with this many injuries.
No, it definitely is. It definitely is a record, KG.
No, Dante is back in the chat.
Oh, Dante 151.
Yeah, he's back in the chat. So if you want to highlight him real
Oh,
quick.
Dante 151. We said earlier in the show, man, appreciate your loyalty, man, and we want to start getting the fans more involved, more engaged, if you will. So I want you to come up with a question or a topic that you want to talk about in the last segment of the show. You know, that time we kind of mess around the last 6-7 minutes of the show. So you come up with a question there, you come up with a topic, we'll talk about it, and then in the future moving forward, we'll find a way to get people in talk. Maybe everybody comes up with a topic, Maz picks the topics that he likes the best, or we rotate each day, and then we get guys involved or women involved or whatever, how you choose to identify involved with the show. So we appreciate that support. Dante 151, you got about 20 minutes.